It's okay with the press. Well, again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to spend the last roughly 4 or 5 months with your district and working on your behalf for the Director of Schools search position. What we hope to do today is talk a little bit about the next steps, the critical steps, the interview process, and the setup for the interview. And then we want to present to you the names of the candidates that we are recommending for your consideration to be the next Director of Schools for Metropolitan Nashville School District. One of the things, and we'll just start that, the more casual and informal you can be in the interview process, the more you're going to learn about the candidate and who the candidate really is. And if I recall, and Joanne helped me on this, in your last interview process, you did set up a square table here and had everybody together, the board and the candidates, at a square table, so it would not be as formal as it is here, where you are the board and the candidate's the candidate. Am I correct on that? And I would suggest you consider doing that. We always recommend that a candidate be interviewed around a square table where all board members can see him or her, and where he or she can see all board members. But it contributes to making the discussion more like a dialogue rather than an inquisition. And sometimes when you're at a dais, it becomes a formal question and answer period. We're going to encourage you, even though you're going to be asking questions and talking about hypothetical situations, to keep the interview process as casual and low-key as possible, because in that manner you're going to learn more about who the candidate really is, rather than getting into an inquisition format where you ask questions and they respond by rote, the typical textbook answers. What you want to do in this first interview, and I'm going to share with you the most important part of the first interview, is not to select your next superintendent, but to make sure anybody you bring back will fit into your community and your school district. Personal fit is an area that too many boards disregard because they get hung up on knowledge of curriculum, knowledge of finance, knowledge of school law, and things of that nature. And I'm going to share with you, in my experience, working with about 150 school boards that have separated with their superintendent. I've never had a board come in and say, Bill, come in and talk with us because our superintendent doesn't know curriculum or finance, or it's the people skills. It's the fit. So we're going to encourage you to put that primary in your consideration for the first interview. And that's why making it as casual, informal, but also have a formality to it with a prescribed script and asking questions of all the candidates in a similar manner. So we do want a formality, but trying to make the candidate feel as welcome and as part of the process as possible. So we do recommend either a round table or a square table where, most importantly, the candidate can see all the candidates, the board members, and the board members all can see the candidate. So you would not have a setup like we have here. You would not have 2 board members like this and me being the candidate. You would have only the candidate at the head of the table and the board members all around, so that he or she can have eye contact with all of you. Obviously, right now, we do have that. That's good. But there's still a little bit of a formality, which will not permit you probably to find out as much about the candidate as if you enter into a dialogue with him. And that's what we're really going to ask you to do, is to spend 2 hours talking to and with the candidate, and mostly talking with him or her. You have 2 hours. There's 9 of you, and you'll see when we get to the format of the interview, we will ask the board chair to introduce the candidate, each of the board members to introduce themselves. And then the chair will not ask any questions until the end of the interview process. And her job during the interview is to make sure that the interview moves. When you think about it, you have only 5 to 6 minutes for each of the questions, and you each have received a copy of them. You could spend 2 hours talking about any one of those questions. We don't expect, and we encourage you not to expect, that you will be able to have full dialogue and get to know how the candidate feels on each of those issues in the roughly 1.5 hours that's allocated to 16 questions. I said it's a 2-hour interview, but you're going to note that there's going to be an opening statement by the candidate, there's going to be introductions, then you're going to have about 1.5 hours, and then we do recommend that you provide the candidate an opportunity to ask you questions at the end. So, Sharon, your responsibility is to make sure that the interview moves. Now, hopefully before we're through, you will feel comfortable enough that everybody will take responsibility for moving it. And many times, the chair has told me after the interviews, I never had to interject. It just moved. Now, the only time you really would have to interject is if you see one of the questions going into 7 or 8 minutes. And at that point, you might say, hey, you know, we could talk about special education all day, but we've got other topics we'd like to talk about. Joanne, might you want to talk about, and then move it into another topic. Otherwise, we're going to ask you to keep track of your 2 questions. Each of you will have 2 questions to keep track of. And even though we have them scripted, we're not expecting you to ask the questions exactly as they're worded. But we want the 2 topics that are attributed to you, and incidentally, all of these questions were sent in by some of you. You don't necessarily have the ones that you were asked, but they were sent in by some of you. The important thing is to make sure those 2 questions are brought up. Now, the candidate is going to, if you follow the script, is going to open up with a roughly 10-minute opening statement about his or her background, what he or she has done. Invariably, the candidate's going to talk about several of the topics you want to talk about. So one of you can pick up just from where the candidate's talking and said, hey, Bill, you know, you talked about finances and taking a budget from the red to the black. We have some budgetary concerns. Share with us how you did that. Now, again, what I want to remind you is you're not going to be able to completely have that question answered in the 6 minutes. What we're going to ask each of you to do, and each of you are going to have a script for the interview, take copious notes. When the candidates come back, we don't recommend you script the interview for the candidates that you bring back. That's where you say, hey, Bill, at the opening interview, you talked about finance. Let's get into that a little more. Again, what is the most important thing we want you to consider as you're looking at candidates for the first interview? The fit with the board, with the community, and with the needs of the students in Metro Nashville. You also want to know the scope of his or her knowledge. The depth of his or her knowledge will come in the second interview. You're not going to be able to explore fully the depth in a 2-hour interview. Your second interview can go longer, and you will have fewer topics. In that second interview, we hope you'll talk about issues very specific to Nashville, and that you want to learn more about how the candidate feels about them. But in the initial interview, you want to know how broad his or her knowledge base is and how he or she will fit the people skills. And I'm going to focus on the people skills significantly because, again, I'm going to share with you our experience is that most boards, if they're not prepped for this, focus on the knowledge skills, the technical skills, and rarely does someone fail on the basis of knowledge or technical skills. We can assure you that all the candidates we're going to present have the knowledge and technical skills. Whether they have them in the depth you desire, that's for you to determine. But it's the people skills and their fit with your school district that are critical. So what are we talking about when we talk about fit? Adaptability. Adaptability to the needs that you have and the priorities you have in the school district. Communication skills. How well do they communicate? Recognizing that the most important skill of communication is? Pardon? Listening. Absolutely, listening. Listening. And I'm going to talk about listening. You're going to have a list of questions. Experienced people and all the people you will be talking to will at times attempt to tell you what they're comfortable in telling you rather than answering the questions you have. And don't let them do that. If they rephrase the question to what they want to tell you rather than what you want to learn, bring them back to the question that you originally asked. And that's part of the listening skills I'm asking you to look for. Does the candidate listen to what you're asking for. Now, because this is an open meeting state, we do recommend that the questions be sent to the candidates ahead of time. I'm sure some of the candidates are watching us as we're presenting today. Are all of them? I don't know, but in order to have an equal playing field, we do recommend that all the candidates get the questions. If this was a closed state search, where you could have it in executive session, we recommend candidates not see the questions before the interview. But with every situation, we have to adapt to what the laws of the state are and the region are. Some other things, people skills, empathy. Does a candidate express empathy in answers that you might talk about in relation to operations of the school district? How collaborative is the candidate? But not only collaborative, how decisive is he or she? Because you could be collaborative to the gazoo, but if you can't make a decision, you'll never survive as a superintendent. And on the other hand, if you're going to make all the decisions from the top down, you're not going to survive in an organization. So a person has to be both collaborative and decisive, and you need to look at that. Team builder. Is the individual a team builder at every level? Is he or she ready to build a team with you as the board, with his or her cabinet, with the principals, with the teachers' unions, with the parents, with the community? You want someone who understands the requirements of team building and uniting people rather than dividing people. Very critical skill for a successful superintendent or director of schools. How well does he or she delegate? And in delegation, is he clear or she clear in directives? And more importantly, does he or she hold accountable the subordinates to whom he or she delegates? Integrity is a key matter. And we're pleased to say that in almost all of our reference checks, the candidates we're going to be presented, at least somebody said on each of them, high integrity, et cetera, et cetera. And then you want someone who is apolitical, yet politically astute. And they may sound like a contradiction. You cannot have a person that's going to come in and politicize your school district. It's politicized enough as it is. You want someone who's going to depoliticize it and build team, while at the same time being politically astute, because if he or she is not politically astute, he or she is not going to be successful with your state legislature, with your municipal government, and with all the other entities that he or she is going to have to interact with in order to be a successful superintendent. But these are the things, when I talk about fit, these are the important things that we hope you will try to ascertain during the first interview, because these are critical skills that are critical to the success of any superintendency. But very candidly, you charged us with trying to see who would be the fit for this school district, and we think these are critical skills in order for someone to move this school district to the next level of excellence. And I think that is the charge that you asked us overall to respond to as we recruited candidates for the position. I'm going to just pause there and say, are there any questions about the people skill aspect? And I dwell on it because it is an aspect that boards, usually on their own, will not give it as much consideration to as the knowledge skills. Any questions? Okay, moving on. You're going to be giving a packet of probably 12 to 15 pages on each of the candidates before we leave today. We're going to encourage you to review that packet carefully. You know, on most of them, one of you may see a connection. Somebody may have gone to a school that you went to a college that you went to, lived in a community you went to, has an interest that you have. In your interview, you know, as I said, keeping it informal, you know, let's say, and again, I'm going to use special education. Let's say your background is special ed, and you saw his or her background was special ed. Leading off by saying, you know, Bob, I see that your background is special ed. That's my special ed background too. Or I see you went to Alabama. I went to Alabama too. Or something like that. Building that connection shows two things. One, you've read the material and you've picked it up. Number two, it builds an affinity with the candidate and adds to that, what I said earlier, building ease and comfort and lack of formality so that you can really get to know the person better than in a much more formal setting. So we encourage you to read the candidate. The other thing is that you have 16 questions that you've been asked to bring up. Invariably, there are going to be spin-off questions that are going to come, and they're going to be different with each of the candidates from the questions you raised. It's okay to delve into that. Remembering the rule, how many minutes do you have for each question?
6 to 7.
5 to 6 minutes.
Correct.
So you got to be careful, because probably every one of these questions can spawn another 100 questions in the minds of 9 of you. I mean, even if it spawned 2 questions in the minds of each of you, that's 18 more questions. So it's okay to bring them up, but recognize you cannot bring them to, you can't discuss them in the depth that I'm sure you'd like to discuss them. Again, if there are areas that you want to discuss, jot it down on your script and then bring it back up you can bring it up in 2 occasions. When you discuss the candidates after the initial interview, and we'll talk about that a little while, you can talk about it there, but bring it up again if you bring the candidate back and have an extended interview with the candidate. So just remember, the questions are countless, but you've got to discipline yourself to make sure that you don't spend too much time on any one question. And then there's the questions that should not be asked, and those are in your section 3. You cannot ask questions that are related to personal background, such as race, gender, age, religious affiliation, political affiliation, arrests, things of that nature. If there's anything that is critical to your decision in any of these areas, feel free to raise the question with us, and we will see if the answer could be legally secured. And finally, we want you to remember that the interview is a reciprocal process. It's a reciprocal process. These candidates are coming to interview you as well as you interviewing the candidate. So we want you, hopefully, to be on your best behavior and try to woo these people to keep them in and want to continue coming to Nashville. And so we just want to bring that to your attention. Any questions about any of those things? On page 2 of section 3, there are things that we ask you to look for, but I'm going to highlight the ones that I think are critical. When you probe, and those questions are designed to probe a little bit, does the candidate get defensive when you probe? Your job is to probe as a board. And if your candidate's going to get defensive in the interview when you probe, you can be sure that that's probably going to be the behavior if he or she was your director of schools. Confidence, overall comfort level. Granted, it's an interview situation. There's going to be some level of being tense, but hopefully he and she will be comfortable enough that they can enter into a dialogue with you and answer your questions. Creativity, problem solving, thinking outside the box. These are things that you might want to look for as you listen to responses. And problem-solving ability. And being able to do things without it being, I did everything. We is a much more powerful word than I. But I've got to caution a little bit, because it's I who want the job. So you're going to see a little bit of the I. The candidates are going to be selling themselves. But if a candidate comes in and as a Lone Ranger did everything, I would be very wary, because a Lone Ranger is not going to be able to move your district. A team builder is going to be able to move your district. So that's important to remember. Remember, keep statements brief. Don't take the airtime. Think through what you're going to say before you say it. Give the candidate as much airtime as possible and be concise. Don't enter into an extended discussion with the candidate as an individual. As a board, we hope the whole process will be a discussion. But don't try to dominate the discussion. And finally, we're going to ask you to not discuss any of the candidates among yourself until you've seen all the candidates. And there will be ample opportunity to discuss the candidates afterwards. As I said, take copious notes, even to the extent of, if you were interviewing me, bald, glasses, striped tie. Because after you see 2 or 3 candidates, you're going to start mixing them up. And so try to put distinguishers on, but also copious notes, so that when you come to discuss the candidates, after you've interviewed all of them, you will be able to discern who was candidate 1, who was candidate 2, etc. Any questions all about the interview process? Because that's all I'm going to say about the interview process. Second interview is going to be a little different. We'll talk about that on Friday. Okay, what are we going to do afterwards? Afterwards, we're not going to ask you which of the candidates you like best. We're going to ask you a three-part question. Which one of these candidates do you feel can take Nashville to the next level of excellence? Which of these candidates, or can these candidates, because obviously at this point, we're going to be talking about all the candidates. Do you feel this candidate can take you to the next level of excellence? Which of these candidates, or do you feel this candidate will be able to fit in and work with this board? Will this candidate be able to fit in and work with this community, with this faculty, with the administrative team, with the people that he or she is going to have to work with in order to move the district? Liking a person isn't as important as finding a competent person who can move the district and do what needs to be done in the district. And so those are the things we're going to ask, and we're going to give you an opportunity as individual board members to pull out your copious notes and go around the table and share where you feel each of the candidates can contribute to the Metro Nashville School District and what you perceive to be their strengths they would bring to the district, as well as raise any questions or information you would like to learn more about the candidates. And after you discuss all of the candidates, you will be asked to identify generally which 3 of these candidates would you like to bring back to learn more about. Sometimes there's a quick divide, and it's 2 candidates that fall on one level and the others in another. We don't necessarily encourage you just bring back 2 candidates, but if that's where it falls, we will discuss that with the board and talk about the pros and cons of bringing 2 versus 3 back. We definitely think that it's to your best advantage not to fall in love with just one candidate immediately, because you're going to find that on the second date, he or she may not be as great as you thought they were on the first date. And just think back to your dating days. Some of you are more recent, some like me, long, long time ago. But you know, you definitely want to see a candidate twice, and that's why we encourage you to keep 3 candidates in, if at all possible. If, very candidly, you see all the candidates and you don't feel any of them are appropriate, we don't want you to bring any of them back. We want you to bring back the candidates that you feel you would have serious consideration about hiring if you brought them back. And candidates, we tell them the same thing. If they come back to the second interview, we expect them to be in the position to take the position if the board wants to hire them. It's okay if a candidate comes in and meets with you and afterwards says, you know, after meeting with the board, I don't think it's a fit. It's okay for a candidate to back out after the first interview. But in our mind, if the candidate comes back for a second interview, we're expecting that, you know, subject to the board wanting him or her, subject to contract negotiations and all the other things, that he or she will accept the position. So that's the process. And any questions? If not, what we want to do is go over the script. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to ask sort of a general question. So I've been growing increasingly uncomfortable with the search.
Sure.
And I thought we ought to address this, and I'm addressing it now before we see the candidates, so everybody knows this is not in any way politically motivated.
Absolutely.
But so I jotted down some notes about the timeline and why I'm having concerns. So I started asking in September or October to start the search, and we didn't start it till spring, and there was never really a reason given as to why we were not starting the search earlier. But in any event, we started in March. In May, we were told we didn't really have heavy hitter applicants, but then after that, we were told there was a list of really good candidates. We had a 1 month postponement, which we all agreed to. I don't think everybody was okay with that. And then last week, we had a very chaotic and problematic vote for interim, which left me feeling queasy about the process. And I think pretty obvious there's a tense atmosphere after the interim vote. I'd asked for the firm to be here, but we had a letter instead. And then, so after all of these delays, we now seem to be moving kind of at breakneck speed to make a decision, and we're going to make a decision in 4 days to narrow down the field. And it may be possible to do that. We may get just a fabulous candidate that we all are thrilled with. I think it would be a miracle at this point if we all are in agreement. But if that happens and we move forward, great. But if not, I guess what I'm asking is what the process would be if we are uncomfortable with the candidate pool or with the interview process, because I think, this is obviously the most important decision we make as a board. Hopefully, we're going to make a decision that lasts 5-10 years, for the district. And I don't want to make that decision, in a rush, or we need to do it calmly. I think emotions are running very high after the interim vote, and I think we all need to be very comfortable with the process and trust the process. And on the other hand, I will say I recognize that we are dealing with someone's livelihood, and I know that these people are exposed. So I guess my question is, what happens if we are not comfortable moving forward with this candidate pool, either after we get the list or after the interview process?
Well, number one, it's your prerogative to interview the candidates that we present. You don't have to interview them. If we present you a candidate today that you don't want to interview, you have that prerogative. I mean, it's your search, it's not ours. I want to make that very clear. And if after you interview the candidates, you don't feel any of them are competent to serve you as you feel needed, you keep on going into search. If you want us to continue with it, when we signed on, we said we'll be with you until you hire someone. If you feel uncomfortable with us, you're welcome to use other sources. So that's your prerogative. Again, I want to make it very clear that this is the board search. It is not our search. When you hired us, when we had our opening presentation, our job is to help you with the search. It is your search, the 9 of you. It's not our search. I can't speak to why it got started so late. I can't speak to all the reasons why it was delayed, but I understood that it was as much calendars of some of the board members as it was other issues. I was not aware that you had requested, and maybe one of us were, but I was not aware you requested us to be here. We were not asked to be here. I was asked to prepare a letter. That's what we did. We were not asked to be involved with the interim search, and we were apprised of it by 2 of your board members. One of your board members called me the next day, and the chair called me the next day. I don't know if I'm answering your questions, Amy, but it's your search. The 9 of you have to make that decision.
So to be clear, though, if we're not going to move forward for whatever reason, I can't come up with one, we need to decide that before those names are handed to us. Out of respect for those candidates who are now waiting and expecting to be moving forward with an interview process. And it is our decision to make. But I think that's the discussion, apparently, that we need to have, because it doesn't need to be after these individuals get exposed. To your very point, Amy, they do have livelihoods. And so we can't sit here and play with their positions that they're in right now. And if the majority of the people sitting at this table do not want to move forward, that just needs to be said with not a whole lot of fanfare, because this is getting bigger than just the 9 of us. There are individuals that, once that information comes to us, it is public information. And I am not going to be in support of you all handing us a packet of candidate information for us then to decide today that we're not going to move forward with the process. So with respect, and I thank you, Mr. Attia, for facilitating, that's the discussion we need to move into, and not after you hand us those names.
I believe, Will, did you have a question? I saw your hand up earlier.
It's hard to know whether the integrity of the search has been compromised until we see the list. So it's hard to then have a conversation about whether the search ought to be delayed. We can't have that conversation in a vacuum.
Help me understand the connection between the quality of those candidates and the integrity of the search.
Well, I think, the irregularities of last week leads me to believe that the integrity of the search has been compromised. I said it last week. I still believe it. But it's hard to ascertain that for sure until we see the list, the types of candidates who are on it, and who they are.
So that would also imply that the candidates list was put together somewhere after that meeting that took place last week.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that have been going on that some of us haven't been privy to.
Anyone else have anything else to add to this? Ms. Baring? Anybody else?
I would just say that the board hired this group to conduct the search, and even though we've had several issues and concerns to arrive since we hired them, I believe that they've still continued to work and carry on their duties that we spent a tremendous amount of money paying them to perform. So that's all.
Bill, out of respect for the media's time, can we go ahead and just surface the list and get that out there publicly, and then move the discussions about interview protocols and other things to later in this meeting?
Well, we're done with the interview protocols. We're
Mr.
done. We are
Candidates,
now
okay.
ready to talk about the script, and then we'll present the candidates. And so your chair did want to get an indication. We can assure you that you've got a strong slate, but that is going to be your prerogative as to whether or not you're going to go forward.
So I'll just add to my comments as far as compromising of the search. I mean, I apologize, but I did anticipate this discussion. Nothing's going to compromise this search more than revealing these candidates' names and then haphazardly deciding we're not going to move forward. And if you honestly believe, and maybe you do, and maybe you don't, but if you honestly believe that highly qualified candidates are going to re-enter this search process after we expose these individuals and then decide we don't want to move forward, I mean, I think we need to be honest that that's a huge risk that we run, unless, again, you're fully aware of that.
Question.
Yes.
Just to circle back around to what you said a few minutes ago, so we still have the right that if we see the candidate list and after having the interviews with them, if there's not a candidate that all of us feel comfortable with, we still have that right
Majority.
to start all over again. Yeah, majority.
It's your, you need 5 votes to select somebody. Very, very candidly, I'm going to be very honest. If this board hired somebody on a 5-4 vote, you're making a significant error. If that's all you can get is 5 votes for a candidate, we would not recommend you hire. We'd recommend you keep on looking. Because this board is not a cohesive board, and you need to have at least a supermajority of support for a new leader that you're going to bring in. And so I would be very hesitant to recommend that this board. So I'm going to give you my bias. Now, it's your search. I want to get it. When you hired us, you asked us, we told you we were going to do a thorough search and we're going to give you advice. But you don't have to take any of our advice, and you don't have to take any of the candidates we're presenting. I'm being very blank. And, and I will speak to the question of compromise. In our minds, this search has not been compromised by anything any individual board member has done with us. And I'm going to put that to bed right now. None of the board members around this table told us to put anybody on a slate or not to put anybody on a slate. I want to be very clear about that to the 3 of us. None of you have told us to put or not to put any candidate on the slate. And I think that's very important to state, because I've gotten some communications from some of you saying that we have not. So publicly I'm stating that. I asked Diana, I asked Peter if they got any. I have not. So I think it's important to put that on the table. The second thing that I think that's important to put on the table is that, again, you folks have got to make the decision as to who your next leader is. And very honestly, you've got to start coming to some sort of a consensus. You've got to find someone that's going to bring you together rather than pull you apart further. And so probably none of you are going to be ecstatic about any of the candidates, but all of you should be pleased with all of them. Do you follow the question I'm saying there? And I think you're going to have to come to a consensus of finding a candidate that's going to be able to pull together the board and pull together the community and pull together the staff, rather than, and this is what I said earlier about being apolitical, yet being politically astute. If any of you hire a candidate to do your bidding, you're making a mistake, because none of you are the board. The 9 of you collectively are the board. And you've got to find somebody to do the bidding of the board that represents the community. And I think at times several of you think you are the board, and you can't do that. You've got to have 5 votes to be a member, to be the board. And in this, I think you need, and maybe I'm going beyond my bounds, but I'm going to have to give you our observations. And I want to dispel any myths about the compromising of the search. Every one of you was given an opportunity to nominate people. We met with each of you individually. Every one of you was able to give us nominations. We followed up on those nominations. After that, none of you told us to put on or to take off any candidate from the list. We will assume responsibility for all of that. None of you have given us a name. Can I say it any clearer? Can I say it any clearer? I mean, I want to be very clear, and I am addressing it to all of you.
I appreciate the lecture. Can we get to the list?
Will, this is not a lecture. This is a dialogue that your board needs in order to find the right superintendent. And I'm not going to take this of pushing. I think the board as a board needs to feel comfortable with it. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, then maybe we shouldn't present this slate. I mean, I leave that up to you.
The only reason why I asked the question was just because I think, for me anyway, it's more important to find the right person for us than it is to meet a particular deadline. And I think that that's, this is a very large, challenging district that needs a special someone to point us, keep us going in the right direction. So that's why I asked that.
We think that all the candidates we're going to present you today can do that. We really do.
I just want to echo, my concern is 4 days with all of the chaos that we've had. I'm concerned that's not enough time to fully vet these candidates. It might be, but as long as we have an opportunity as a board to have a discussion.
If you need more time, that's a board prerogative again. The
Yes.
calendar was set with you as a board. If
Right.
you feel you need a week, the only thing we're going to advise you is the longer you wait, the greater the probability you're going to lose a candidate.
Right, so that's the only caution, Ms. Froeg, and I think that's what got us to, as when Peter was here presenting the timeline and keeping it condensed, right, which is why we shifted the whole thing instead of leaving that 2-week gap as we tried to plan community engagement. So again, I hear everybody's concerns and they're not invalid. Please don't think that's what I'm saying. But I think Anna's approach makes perfect sense. I don't think we can look at just a resume. If that was the case, we would have never scheduled interviews. So let's allow the process to work and then make that decision as a board about whether or not we believe we've been presented a candidate that can do the things that we want to see happen in this district. Is that fair?
Yes.
We good? All right.
We're going to talk about script now.
Your nose has been turned up since you started this table. What you want?
We shared with you the script. What I said earlier, the approach is going to be opening comments, 10 to 15 minutes after introduction of the board members. Each of you are going to be asked to give a 20-second introduction to yourself, and then give the candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves. There are some changes. I do want to point out on page 3, on page 4, the reading ELL question at Jill's request was reworded, and Jill asked that the question she originally raised on page 5 on culture, if she might be able to ask that question. And then, because of that, there's a question that Mary suggested on page 8 that we had originally given to Jill that we're asking Mary to take. That's okay with you, Mary? the one on accountability, evaluating, and ending programs.
So did you read the rewording? Is it what you asked for?
No, well, actually, the rewording is not what I asked for, but I can use my own words.
Is the second one you handed out different
Right.
from the one that was on the table?
Yes.
Okay.
The
so
one,
you look at
the
second one.
changes I'm talking about. And again, Jill and I talked briefly about this before the meeting, and I said, the
okay.
general areas is the area you wanted, but she wants to word it a little different, and that's fine. As I said earlier, we didn't script this that you got to read it verbatim. In fact,
Okay.
we'd rather not have you read it verbatim.
Right.
But we want each of you to remember the 2 areas that you're going to bring up in each interview. Now, the area that is the predominant question is in bold. The other areas are to bring candidates back to what you want to find out about the candidate. And so it's really a tool, but what we are asking is that the roughly 16 questions that are brought up here
All get covered.
are raised with every candidate.
Yeah. So you're good with it? Okay.
And I'm just want to ask, are there any questions or any changes any of you may want?
Does this include the questions I sent to Diana last week?
It does not, because those 2 questions are relatively in-depth questions that deal with lawsuits, finances, and very honestly, we felt that those are better set for the second interview when you can get into greater depth. In 5 minutes, you really can't talk about all the implications of going into a lawsuit and all that. They're both good questions. The third question, I think we can answer for you to a degree today. The third question, I don't know if you shared that with all your, about candidates that were concerned about internal candidates' impact on the search, and we will talk about that a little later. Okay? Any other questions? Do you feel comfortable with the script? Okay, we will move into presenting the candidates. I'm presenting the candidates. Peter's going to present 2. Diane's going to present 2. The 4 candidates we're presenting today were on your original 6 a month ago. 2 of the candidates that were on the list have backed out in the past 2 weeks. We discussed at great depth whether we should add or not add candidates. We went back to the list. We looked at all of them. We felt that there was a very logical cutoff between number 6 and number 7 a month ago. And we felt that if we went beyond number 6, that the quality of the candidates would not be as comparable as just seeing 4. So we are presenting to you 4 candidates today for your consideration. Peter will present 2 alphabetically. Diana will present 2 alphabetically. The 3 of us will be happy to make comments on any of the candidates, and we do welcome your questions. We are presenting them in alphabetical order. And any questions? You feel comfortable with the process? Yes. I'm going to go.
So Bill is going to share with you the application packets for each person as we discuss.
Was that briefcase handcuffed to you when you were traveling? Just asking.
And I know there's always sometimes a disadvantage that you might not listen to what I'm going to say, but I hope you do listen. But we give you the application packet so that you can make notes as we go. I'm going to talk with you about their educational background, their experiences, what the references say. I'm going to share with you the specifically requested information that was provided, the list that was provided to us by the board. And we're also going to address any adverse publicity that might be out there about the candidates, because they're all Googleable, and we know that people will do that, and so we wanted to share with you what you might find. So the first person is John Covington. John is a scholar and a learner. He has 2 doctorates, one from the University of Missouri and one from Auburn University. He also has degrees from Troy and Alabama State University. His doctorates are in educational leadership. His first degrees were in counseling and school administration. He's worked for 29 years in the field of education. He's currently directing a company that he founded, the National Institute for Student-Centered Teaching and Learning. And he's doing that through an arrangement with the Broad Foundation. One of his projects is working with a school district in Macomb County, Mississippi. We recruited John to be a candidate on the recommendation of our associates, and as we pursued him, he agreed to give serious consideration to the position because he sees it as an opportunity to use all that he has learned in his various experiences for the betterment of the children and the citizens of Davidson County. He has been a school administrator for 8 years in Alabama, in Eufaula, Troy, and Tuskegee, before becoming the assistant superintendent in Montgomery Public Schools, Montgomery, Alabama, a system of 35,000 students. His first superintendency was in a small school district in Haynesville, Alabama, with the Lowndes County School District of 3,000 students, 99% African American, 97% poverty. When he arrived, the schools were not meeting standards, and the state was about to take over at least one of the schools. 6 years later, all the schools were meeting AYP and learning the intended curriculum. John provided the leadership for all schools to acquire accreditation by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. This is an accreditation that had not been even sought after, much less accomplished by the school district. Because of his record in Lowndes County, he was recruited for a position in Pueblo, Colorado, a school district of 18,000 students, where he provided leadership for the development and implementation of a strategic plan. In so doing, he engaged some 350 citizens to be a part of that collaborative process. The result of the process was that the district implemented the plan and subsequently was recognized by the governor's office and the Colorado State Department of Education for having the most schools in the state with significant gains in closing the achievement gap as required by No Child Left Behind. And also in Pueblo, under John's leadership, he generated more than $20 million in grants, state and federal. These changes came about in just 3 short years of changing the district's climate and culture in order for students to receive a world-class education. It's an education that will prepare them to be workforce and college ready. And he also did it through a process of developing stronger collaborations with the city and the county municipalities, as well as the businesses and not-for-profit organizations in the Pueblo area. He's worked closely with associations to get increased support for the public schools in Pueblo. He also lowered the dropout rate, increased the percentage of students fulfilling requirements for high school graduation, while implementing a dual enrollment program with the Pueblo Community College and Colorado State University, allowing high school students to earn both an associate degree while concurrently fulfilling requirements for a high school graduation. His next superintendency was in Kansas City, Missouri, a school district of 17,200 students, which he led back from the precipice of state receivership. Within 2 years, averted bankruptcy in that school district. They balanced the budget and came up with a surplus and established a strategic plan, this time with a cadre of more than 500 citizens, to establish a framework for a curriculum that was aligned to national and international standards. The district, for the first time in recent history, required professional evaluation for all of its certificated employees. And in addition to that, established a staff development program that was aligned to the expectations on the employee evaluation. So it was a means for implementing a culture of accountability. It was during his work in Colorado and Missouri that John came to the attention of the Broad Foundation, which prevailed upon him to accept the position as the Chancellor of the Michigan Education Achievement Authority to work with 11,000 students who were in failing schools that drastically needed a different approach for learning. Here's a summary of what happened. With 12 traditional and 3 charter schools with a 73% poverty level and 3% English language learners, throughout the efforts of more than 500 employees, most of whom were certified employees, on a budget of about $108 million. The students prior to creation of the authority had an achievement baseline of 18% in English and 2% in math. when tested on the standards used by the state of Michigan. By the first year, 51% of the students were achieving 1 year of growth in English language arts, and they saw a 1 year of growth among 56% of the students in mathematics. And by the second year, the students were not only achieving 1 year of growth, a majority of the students were not only achieving 1 year of growth in English language arts and in math, but the students, 39% of the students received 2 years of growth in 1 year, and another 67% achieved 2 years of growth in English language arts. There were similar results in math, and all 6 of the K-8 schools were in the top 20 of the 128 targeted schools in the state of Michigan. John led the development of the schools with the personnel and curriculum from the ground up. They were able to obtain $50 million in grants from the Broad Foundation, the Robertson Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, Microsoft. Dr. Covington started the Achievement Authority from scratch in a politically intense environment. He took over failing schools, a concept to which some unions and some superintendents were opposed. The schools under his leadership were outperforming other schools by the third year. However, in the end, the direction of the Achievement Authority changed. John lost the support of the new board, and he was asked to leave. John became the target of some accusations, even though he continued to have the support of the governor and the business community. Whenever similar situations arise, there are always controversies, and the Detroit News did an investigation on his use of a credit card that was assigned to him in his role as chancellor. The credit card was used for travel and professional development expenses for a number of employees. They were not his expenses. Sometimes the staff, including John, were required to attend professional development conferences at locations where the funders wanted to hold the conferences. And some of these were in areas that appeared to be vacation-oriented, such as Orlando, Florida. John was a high-profile person in the state, and some would say that he became a target. References say that he is a very bright educator who knows the elements of school reform and is politically astute enough to successfully implement the elements of school reform. He also is known as an extremely hard worker, almost to a fault, that he knows one pace, and that's all out. References continue that he knows how to turn around underperforming schools, he works well with boards of education, and is a courageous superintendent. He has the resources and the commitment. If he has the resources and commitment, he will use them well. He's described by people who know him as one who knows how to study communities, and they say he's a bold leader. We present John for your serious consideration based upon the track record that he has established as a focused and untiring superintendent who has a reputation for making sure that the job gets done with attention to detail. So that's kind of an overview of John. It summarizes his 29 years.
Are there any questions? Candidate 2. Can I just make one real comment? It's right on the front. This candidate is a native of Nashville and a graduate of your school system.
This is Angela Huff. Dr. Huff began her educational journey right here in Nashville, as Bill said, where she attended public schools, graduating from Pearl High School, and matriculating to Clark College in Atlanta, from which she graduated summa cum laude. She later did advanced work at Emory University with a major in business education, and then on to complete her PhD at the University of Southern Mississippi. She began a professional career of 31 years in Gwinnett Public Schools in Georgia, 8 years as a teacher, before being recognized as a leader and receiving a position in Cobb County in Marietta, Georgia, as an assistant principal for 5 years. She then was a principal for 13 years, working in both low-achieving and achieving schools. One low-achieving school had more than 100 languages spoken in the homes of the students. However, even in the achieving schools, she learned that not all groups were achieving at the level of the average scorers in the schools. She and the staff took on the challenge of closing the achievement gaps for identified underachieving groups and were successful to the point where it was not only a high-achieving school, but the gaps were significantly closing, and the school received the prestigious Georgia School of Excellence Award from the State Department of Education. In 2010, Angela was appointed as an assistant superintendent in Cobb County by Superintendent Michael Hinojosa, former and current interim superintendent at Dallas ISD in Texas, where she was responsible for 17 schools. She then was appointed to her current position of Chief of Staff for the Superintendent, representing the Superintendent in various capacities for the past 3 years. She not only works closely with the Superintendent and handles speaking engagements on his behalf, but she works directly with board members regarding training and concerns they have with the schools. The Cobb County School District has almost 112,000 students, 45% of which qualify for free and reduced meals, 32% African American, 20% Latino, 5% Asian, and a 23% mobility rate. The district operates on a budget of $944 million, as it is one of the largest school districts in the United States, with more than 13,000 employees and 114 schools. The schools include 16 high schools, 2 charter schools, 6 magnet high schools for advanced studies, math, science, technology, international studies, engineering and biotechnology, international baccalaureate, performing arts, and medical sciences and research. The school district has a 78% graduation rate, which is in an upward trend over the last 3 years. Angela has been a featured presenter at leadership institutes in both Cobb County and Fulton County, professional development conferences, as well as being a part-time professor at Kennesaw State University. She's a listener and a learner. She believes that she cannot have a sense of what needs to be improved until you know the story. And she has directed the principals under her supervision to have the same style, showing respect for what has transpired in schools, what has been accomplished, and then trying to understand the perceived needs of the people in the schools. In her role of supervising communications for the Cobb County Public Schools, she understands the importance of constantly sharing so that the district is in charge of their messaging, so that they know that the plans, the successes, and the next steps are communicated not only to the staff, but to the general community. And it's not just the message that is important, but it's the substance of the plan that Angela learned in her experience in schools, especially those with unequal achievement records. Longitudinal data that continued across the span of years is as important as seeing teacher data. If students are not performing in problem solving, and that's consistent year after year, they need to look more closely at that and to analyze why that's happening. She's done that. She's done that collaboratively with staff and also with parents, bringing students into the conversations as well. She has limited experience with charter schools. However, her current superintendent has begun a study of charter schools for their district, and she's responsible for providing the board with information so that they can use to make the best policy decision in the interest of students. Is there controversy around Angela Huff? Not much. She one time had to dismiss an employee after trying to help that employee improve. The employee used the media to try to turn the tables on Angela, but without success. Her references say that she's a class act and very professional. She respects people who work for her and possesses the ability for great follow-through, and she's detail-oriented and gets the job done. She builds very positive working relationships with everyone and has high expectations for herself and others, holding folks accountable, but she nurtures them along the way. As an area superintendent, she supervised between approximately 17 schools. She had 2 principals who weren't performing as they should, and she provided the necessary professional development and worked with them to become higher performing principals. At times, she can be too humble and tentative, but when she is put on the spot, she has delivered on behalf of the school district, her references say. When asked, would you hire her for a position like this, the responses were absolutely, without hesitancy. She puts all the necessary hours to get the job done. She's very smart and able to work with diverse groups of people. Angela Dobbins Huff comes to you with a passion that emanates from her roots, her upbringing in this community, and her willingness to devote this significant portion of her career for the betterment of the community of metropolitan Nashville and its children. She acknowledges the good things that have been done here and cares deeply about the future of the schools. We recommend for your consideration Angela Huff.
Any questions?
I have a question. So am I correct that she has never served as superintendent? She's been an assistant superintendent or area superintendent, but it's not really a superintendent when it's an area superintendent. Looks like her title was assistant superintendent. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then she was promoted to chief of staff to the superintendent.
So when she's chief of staff, she is the superintendent?
No, she's
Okay,
not.
I'm sorry, I'm
She
confused.
performs in place of the superintendent when the superintendent is not there.
Okay, okay. And she oversees 17 schools?
No, she's
When
the
she was
chief of staff
assistant.
now. She
For the whole
had-
district.
She had that job for 3 years, and now she's the chief of staff to the superintendent.
For the whole district, all schools.
Okay, I don't know what a chief of staff does.
The chief
I'm
of
not
staff
familiar with
is a
that.
person that really does much of the operations for the school district, because the superintendent is involved in political activities and things of that nature. So chief of staff is really the one who works in place of the superintendent when the superintendent is not available, and they generally appear in very large districts.
And is there only one chief of staff?
One chief of staff.
Thank you.
If you might say in a hierarchy, you have an assistant superintendent, an associate, a deputy, chief of staff.
Okay.
The next candidate is no stranger to most of you, and many of you may know more about him than we do. That is Michael Looney, who is the superintendent of Williamson County.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to present to you Dr. Michael Looney. And as Bill is distributing the application packet, I'll just start briefly by indicating Michael had somewhat of an unusual background. However, he did spend most of his professional years in education. From 1981 to 1988, he served in the United States Marine Corps, and then he spent some time in private industry. So in the minds of some, he may be a non-traditional, atypical candidate, but he did eventually gravitate towards education. Starting out in 1994 for 3 years in Pell City, Alabama, where he was an elementary school teacher. Can you hear me? Where he was an elementary school teacher. From then, he went on to Calhoun County Schools in Alabama, serving as assistant principal, assistant to the superintendent. And then in 2003 to 2005, Dr. Looney was assistant superintendent in Montgomery Schools in Alabama, and Montgomery Schools has some 33,000 students. He then went on to another district in Alabama, where he actually was superintendent for 4 years, and that was Butler County Schools, and then ultimately ending up here in Williamson County Schools in Franklin, Tennessee, where he's been in the position as superintendent for 6 years, starting in 2009. The enrollment, as you probably know, there's approximately 36,000 students, and he supervises a staff of less than 5,000. The budget is $290 million. His academic credentials, he has a Bachelor of Science degree from Jacksonville State, also a master's degree from Jacksonville State, and he holds a doctorate from the University of Alabama. Some of his significant accomplishments in his current position include increasing student achievement. He's also managed significant population growth in the district, and he's attracted and retained quality teachers and staff. He's developed numerous student support systems that would serve to enhance the district's success. Just some more data, if you will, specific data. As you can tell, in 2009, the Tennessee District Report Card listed Williamson County's average ACT composite score as 22.6. However, under Dr. Looney's leadership, the composite scores have steadily increased each year. And so most recently in 2005, the ACT composite has moved from 2009, as I indicated, 22.6 to 23.7. During the baseline year, during his initial year in Williamson County, there were approximately 4,200 students enrolled in AP courses. And since he's been there, under his tenure, that number has increased significantly. This year, or for the past year, enrolling some 7,600 plus students in AP courses. Student achievement has been something that he has been able to accomplish in numerous ways. And so you've just seen one example. Another example deals with achievement results in grades 3 through 8. And as educators, you know the importance of starting very early with our young folks. And so since his tenure, he's experienced an 11-point increase in reading achievement and a 22-point increase in math achievement for all students in Williamson County, again in grades 3 through 8. Most importantly, what this has done is serve to close the achievement gap. And he's closed the achievement gap for different populations of students. So overall, he's closed the achievement gap. But when you disaggregate that by student groups, you have some more profound information and data that you can review at your leisure. For instance, when we're talking about students with disabilities, he's increased their proficiency, moved it to advanced level in reading and math, and doubled it, therefore closing the achievement gap for that population of individuals. Most recently, the TCAP achievement data indicates that 62% of the LEP students are now proficient or advanced. And another example indicates that at one time, only 41% of the economically disadvantaged students were at advanced or proficient in math. That was in 2010. Now, 63% of that population is now proficient or advanced in math. So he's instituted a number of initiatives and safeguards and support systems to work with closing the achievement gap, not only across student groups, but within and among student groups as well. Another one of his achievements has been that he's created an Aspiring Leaders Academy, and that's designed to attract high-performing teachers to leadership positions, almost something like a grow your own, looking internally within. The baseline graduation rate has increased since he's been at the helm. At one time, it was 91.8%. And it has increased as recently as the 2015 graduation rate. He has reported that it's expected to be almost 95%. Looking at some of his most significant accomplishments by his own standards, one has been leading that improvement process across the board. And notice he says leading the improvement process, not taking the ownership for himself, but it's a testament to his ability to work with teams and groups. He's also developed a program called Ladders to Hope, and this program was predicated upon building relevance in the lives of students who might not otherwise have much hope, so that they have full access to technology tools. He's also built positive relationships with those he serves, with those being all stakeholders across the stakeholder groups, whether they be students, they be parents, employees, or others outside of the district. He served a career, in his words, of mentoring others, and he has a standard practice which I found, and I think we all found very interesting, of meeting with prospective high school dropouts prior to signing release forms. And that's really an attribute to his own personal experiences. When talking and reviewing his references, some of them have said he's a superintendent in his 6th year working in a neighboring district, and he's helped the board focus on issues of common interest that impact the education of all students. He's also focused on areas in which students were not performing, as well as the overall performance of the district as supported by the data that I've provided to you. He recognizes that inequitable is not always equal, and that there's a need to put resources where they need to be placed and address the unique needs of students and student subgroups. Dr. Looney definitely understands the politics of Tennessee. He knows Tennessee laws, finance, individuals within the State Department of Education. He understands the needs of disadvantaged children primarily because he was one, so he has walked in their shoes. References characterize him as being empathetic, collaborative. He's improved the culture and performance in the district, and everyone doesn't necessarily always agree with him, but they generally have he has the respect of most people and is able to engage them. Dr. Looney is characterized as being a good listener. He's very comfortable in interacting with students and advocating for them, focusing primarily on their needs. So he is very student-centered. He is a person of impeccable character, and he has an in-depth commitment to public education. References has indicated that he's developed an excellent administrative team, and it has provided the leadership needed for recruiting strong staff throughout the district at all levels. He's also described as being an out-of-the-box thinker, compassionate, and one who has definitely engaged the community in developing a comprehensive strategic plan which has provided the focus to address the needs, again, of all students. So it's with our pleasure that we present to you candidate number 3, Dr. Michael Looney.
Any questions? Our next candidate is Dr. Barry Shepard.
As Bill mentioned, our next candidate is Dr. Barry Shepard. Dr. Shepard has academic credentials from Appalachian State University in North Carolina, where he has a bachelor's and a master's degree. And he also has the earned doctorate, the PhD, from Columbia University in New York. Currently, Dr. Shepard is retired as of this minute. He has spent the past 7.5 years as superintendent in Cabarrus County Schools, located in Concord, North Carolina. The budget there, $280 million, student enrollment 31,000, and a staff of 4,000. Dr. Shepard also has an education background in that he started out in 1989 as a director of bands in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. He gravitated to the position of assistant principal in Thomasville, North Carolina, then an elementary principal in Lexington, North Carolina, another elementary principalship in Statesville, North Carolina, and was also executive director there. And then in 2001 became assistant superintendent in Mooresville, North Carolina. And in his first superintendency was in Elkin City Schools, also North Carolina, from 2003 to 2008, and as I indicated, his last position as superintendent was in Cabarrus County Schools. He currently is working, by the way, as a music and arts consultant in Nashville. He has spent 30 years working in education, and among those years, he has been a turnaround principal in 2 school districts, the school districts that I mentioned. He does speak some Spanish. Some of his significant accomplishments, again, focus on raising the achievement level. He's raised the achievement level across districts. But when you're looking again at student subgroups, he's also made an impact there. He's also created school choice opportunities for families in the district, and that has intentionally been a target where he says they prove to be the clear school. He's put in place an organizational structure and a strategic planning process for continuous improvement. And that's one of the most significant 5 accomplishments that he has listed. He also has earned a lot of experience in new school construction, including 1 new high school, 2 new middle schools, 4 new elementary schools, and many additions and renovations to existing schools in the district. He created the school choice option again for families that includes 7 magnet schools, 6 career academies, 2 language immersion programs, and an early college high school. Overall, some of his key qualifications are listed there on your cover sheet. He's a person of high integrity, personal and professional. He's been proven to be a collaborative team leader. He also has developed strategic partnerships with community leaders. He's visionary. He's described as being self-disciplined. Also, he's very passionate and focused on student achievement. At the forefront of everything he does is the student and student outcomes. He's a leader of innovative programs, and he's also offered a steadying influence amidst considerable change and growth in a district where there has been dwindling resources. When we checked with Dr. Shepard's references, he was characterized as being very bright, one who focuses on needs of students and has that need always as his goal. He's handled student population growth extremely well. The district is now one of the top 10 largest districts in the state of North Carolina, and he has supervised the construction of 8 of the new schools in that district. He's also been characterized as a person of high integrity, and he's almost universally respected. He led a large growing district with no major controversies, and yet he assembled an extremely strong administrative team. He's visionary, he's a team builder, he's innovative, he's a problem solver, he's strong, he's steady, and he consistently, over and over again, addresses the needs of the district's growing at-risk population. He's a strong proponent of the arts as well as athletics, and really sees the benefit of both of those programs as part of students' persistence in school and reaching out to various subgroups of students to help improve their academic performance as well. It is with our pleasure that we present to you Dr. Barry Shepard. Are there any questions? Yes.
You said that he just recently retired. That was his choice. That was not.
Yes. Good question. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm sorry, she has another one. That's okay.
So I am not advocating for anyone in particular, but I wonder, when we were talking about Jay Steele not being on the list, we talked about the candidates having more qualifications than him, and I noticed that Ms. Huff seems to have the same qualifications as Jay Steele, and I was wondering what differences you saw between Ms. Huff and Mr. Steele.
We based it on all of the information we received on both Dr. Huff and Dr. Steele from our reference checking and all the rest, and we felt that she was a strong candidate from the perspective of the responsibility she had in chief of staff position.
But is the chief of staff somehow different than Steele's position? I mean, I think it's this, how is it different?
Dr. Steele's position is limited to the area of instruction, while as chief of staff covers all areas of the school district operation, finances, communications, et cetera, in different ways.
Okay.
What we have is a tentative schedule, if you should choose to interview the 4 candidates. And Peter, if you want to pick up on this.
The schedule is starting a little bit later than we had anticipated. So it starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the board coming together. And the first interview is at 3:30. Excuse me, the board coming together at 3:30, and thank you. And 3:45, the first interview. The board, I think originally the meeting was posted for a 1 o'clock start, so I'll leave that up to the board in terms of what actual time they want to come together to talk about procedures and assigning roles. And so we scheduled tentatively Barry Shepard to be the first interview and Michael Looney to be the second one on Thursday, and then on Friday, Angela Huff to be the first one and John Covington to be the second one. And then we would come in and meet with the board following those interviews. As you can see, we've allowed 2-hour block of time for each interview and have the candidates arrive shortly before they're scheduled.
Are there any questions?
Is it appropriate to respond to these 4 candidates?
Yes. I mean, the board has the prerogative to decide whether they want to interview or not interview the candidates, and according to the schedule that is set here.
I'll just say that it concerns me that we have 2 candidates that come from very small districts. And we have one that's been dismissed by their board. It seems like we have one viable candidate, so I'm disappointed. I had hoped that we would see 4 wonderful candidates that we could choose from. So just after looking at this, I'll just give you my honest feedback.
Yeah. Well, and we appreciate that, Jill. I think you really have to see the candidates before you can jump to that conclusion, very honestly.
I'm just thinking about their experience here,
Right.
their experience. Yes,
Right.
I'm open-minded, but I'm saying when we have 84,000 students in this district.
Right.
And to talk to candidates that have only dealt with 36,000 kids is just, it's disappointing to
Right,
me.
right. Any other comments? And it's a prerogative of the board. The board has the responsibility to determine whether you want to see any or all of these candidates.
So I'll say for my part, I'd like to see them all. I don't really count the relationship between superintendent and number of students. I would really like to discuss the issues that are facing MNPS and how they would address those. And I think the questions that everyone has submitted are designed to have that kind of dialogue and conversation so that we can uncover strategies and approaches and knowledge. Yeah, it would have been, I guess, nice, but I don't know that all of these superintendents started in an 84,000 school district. And I think some of the ones that we've heard, I won't say all of them, but some of them that we've heard and the things that they've been able to accomplish with moving scores, creating the relationships, especially those that have been able to build relationships with several foundations to get the financial support to supplement our budget, which we know is a concern that we have with all the things we would love to see happen with our EL population, which I know that Mr. Pinkston's very passionate about, with being able to expand our reading programs and professional development. I think we heard a candidate that did something similar to what we've done here with creating an institute to grow and improve professional development among their staff. I know we also have Ms. Froh, who's very passionate about wraparound services, and we've heard another candidate that's done some other things with, again, reaching out to the community and bringing to bear some of those relationships to expand those levels, that level of support, and having experiences. I think one candidate having experience in a district with a significantly high poverty rate. You thought I wasn't listening. So I think we have placed before us a slate of candidates that have the experiences that are germane to the issues that are facing MNPS. There may not be a one-to-one relationship. I don't want to minimize, and please don't take this the wrong way. We're not looking for a heart transplant that requires a one-to-one match on 52 different markers. We're looking for someone who has had experiences with the types of issues that we've had. The superintendent doesn't work with 84,000 students. They work with a staff that they have to build strong relationships with. They work with a board that they have to be able to work with. They identify talent, which is important and germane to being able to have a strong district, and they look for that talent so they can go out and grow more talent. And so, again, for me, I think that we have, again, a slate of candidates that have a myriad of those experiences, not one with all of them. We've not seen one or heard of one that has them all in one package. But again, the other component of that would be the creativity, the innovation, and the ability to go out and create those relationships and support systems to expand that breadth of support in those areas where we believe are necessary for the district. So I want to thank you all for the work that you've done. I know it's been challenging. I know we started off with a larger slate, and certain circumstances within and or beyond our control have caused that to change. But I think we still are left with individuals that are worthy of a conversation. If you have nothing else, if there are no further questions, any next steps or guidance from you on what we need to do next, other than be prepared at 3:30 on July the 9th?
If the board is predisposed to interview the 4 candidates, that would be at 3:30 on Thursday. And I presume the location is right here.
Yes.
Right.
Is that it? Thank you all. Thank you. I know it's the middle of the day. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.